Hey everybody, this is day 3 of Unit 1. Today's topic is Conquest of the Americas, and our focus question is how did the uniquely violent cultures of Catholic Europe conquer the Americas? In addition to the questions that we're going to answer today, these are some of the questions that students came up with that I think are also important. These are all really good questions that students asked, and I hope that they will all be answered in the lecture today. The first question I have is what was the requerimiento and what did it mean for Amerindians in Spanish? So requerimiento was a document. The direct translation is something like requirement, but you want to think of it more like the word demand. So it was a document of demands, and the Spaniards would arrive in America and read this document out loud to a group of gathered indigenous people. The document says, more or less, in complicated legal language, you have to declare if you're Catholic right now, if you're Catholic or Christian and you believe in Jesus Christ, you have to tell us right now. And if you don't tell us right now, then we have the right to take your belongings, kidnap your people, kill you, declare war, any of those things. The requerimiento was a sort of like declaration of what the Spanish were going to do, and if you didn't understand what they were saying, that wasn't an excuse. So you have to imagine some people, like in this picture here on the left, the Taino are on the shores of what is now Puerto Rico, and the Spanish arrive and read a document in Spanish or in Latin even, and you don't understand those languages. And then when they finish reading, you don't respond because you don't know what they just said. And then they immediately start attacking. And that's a not exactly the scene that happened, but something like that may have happened over and over again. The pictures on the right are probably dramatized, over dramatic versions of some things that happened. Indigenous people were held prisoner, they were threatened at the point of a crossbow, they were threatened with attack by vicious dogs, and some were, in fact, burned alive for being heretics, for not being Catholic, which is not surprising since they had never heard of the religion before. The next question is why did Encomienda lead to Amerindian rebellions? So Encomienda are a system set up by the Spanish originally when the first conquistadors came to America. This image of here shows us the plan versus the reality. The plan was that Spanish settlers would come to America and they would care for and Christianize the Indians that they encountered. The Indians would then work for part of their time for Spanish settlers, sort of in exchange. The reality, though, was a little bit less nice. The reality was that Spanish settlers forced the Indians to do long hours of labor. They didn't pay the workers. They failed to protect the Indians. They took the Indian lands and property. And many of the Indians died from diseases and harsh living and working conditions. The images on the bottom show us how Encomienda was going to look in practice. So at the bottom left here is an idealized image of a farm set up by an encomendiero, the person in charge of the encomienda. And he would be given a grant of land that included a village, the native people that lived in the village, and he would set up his own house and farm nearby, sometimes building a mission or a church nearby as well. This system amounted to effectively slavery for the native people. As you can see in this picture, native people were farming, doing the farm labor, but they were doing so under guard. There's a man at the bottom left of the screen with an attack dog and a whip. There's another man to the right-hand side that it's on a horse. He has armor on. He's holding a sword. So these Amerindians are not working voluntarily. They are working effectively as slaves. On the right-hand side, you have American Indians working in mines, mining for gold and delivering it to their Spanish lords. These encomenderos, the Spanish lords, claimed the right to the land and the labor of the Indians themselves. Both of these situations, in practice, ended up enslaving the native people. Many of the women and children were brought into the missions or into the churches to convert to Christianity. But then that actually led to them being held as effectively as hostages to the Spanish, while the Spanish demanded increasing amounts of labor from the men in those families. This led to rebellions by Amerindians because of the harsh working conditions, the harsh treatment, the lack of pay, the low food rations, the high amount of diseases, and so living amongst the Europeans would have been incredibly deadly. All of these things combined to lead to rebellions because the Amerindians were not allowed to just leave. They were forced to stay there, stay in the missions, stay as laborers, and then your only choice would be to rebel and to fight back. We're going to shift gears and talk about Brazil for a moment and talk about the Portuguese. So the question is, who were Bandeiras and what did they do in Brazil? The Bandeiras, or Bandeirante, were Portuguese men who were effectively slave catchers. Some of their job was to catch runaway slaves, but a larger part of their job was to catch people who had never been slaves and make them into slaves. So you have several images here that show us these different parts of their job. On the top, you have a bandeira, or bandeirante, who is whipping an enslaved person who's tied up at the bottom of the picture. On the far right, we have one of these guys with a gun shooting into the forest. You have some indigenous people up at the top shooting back, probably shooting poisonous arrows. We don't know. One of the questions students ask is, why didn't the Native Americans fight back? And the answer is they did fight back. They fought back quite a bit. But the Portuguese and the Spanish had guns and horses and killer dogs and all these other things on their side because of their legacy from their incredibly violent culture in Europe. This picture down here at the bottom is a painting of a relatively famous bandeirante. And if you look at that picture, you kind of see he looks kind of like we might imagine a pirate would look. And that's not surprising. This is the same time period as a lot of the pirate legends come from. On the bottom left is a picture of a sugar processing area in a sugar plantation. The bandeiras captured slaves and brought them to Brazil to work on the sugar plantations because the sugar plantations needed lots and lots of labor. It was really, really hard labor and really, really dangerous labor. So the slaves would work for several years, and the death rate was incredibly high on these plantations because the work was so hard in hot weather next to a hot fire. It was dangerous, danger of having your limbs be crushed, danger of your skin getting burned, along with just general disease and exhaustion. This leads us to the new laws, which the King of Spain instated in 1542. The new laws are the new laws. They're effectively new regulations that make it now required that the Spanish treat the Native Americans, the American Indians, the Amerindians, with a greater amount of respect. They outlined how you cannot just imprison people and enslave them for not being Christian. Instead, you must try to convert them. You must give them the opportunity to learn about the religion and to study Christianity before you just straight up imprison them. It required the Spanish to stop making new encomienda. It required that the encomienda that existed already be disbanded as soon as the current encomendero died. So the original conquistadors who came to America and were given encomendera, these grants of land and Indian labor, as soon as that generation of men died, all of those native people were supposed to be set free. This is positive because it means it's effectively illegal to enslave American Indians just for not being Catholic. You, of course, still can enslave them for being criminals. You can enslave them for breaking the law or if they owe you money, but you can't just enslave them because of their religious beliefs. You have to try to convert them. This brings us to Africa, which might seem like a strange jump to make, but now that the Spanish cannot enslave American Indians anymore, and in Brazil, many of the American Indians are dead, where are the Spanish and the Portuguese going to turn to get their slaves to do the work on their, let's say, sugar plantations? So the Europeans go to Africa to obtain slaves. The question is, how did Europeans explain enslavement of Africans as a just war? And so they did it in the same way that they explained their enslavement of Native Americans earlier. They said, we're going there and we're getting people who are not Christian and we're enslaving them so as to help them learn how to be Christian. One strange little loophole that the Portuguese used through this sort of law was that the Portuguese went famously to Congo and converted the people of Congo. You can see down here at the bottom, Congo people going to church. And they converted to Catholicism. And so the Congo people themselves were not enslaved by the Portuguese. However, the Portuguese were able to get the Congo to declare war on some of their neighbors and then enslave those neighbors and then sell those newly enslaved people to the Portuguese and other Europeans. This led to this picture up here at the top on the right side, where the kings of West Africa in the various nations had a choice to make. They could ally themselves with the Europeans, convert to Christianity, and enslave their neighbors and sell them on to the Europeans, or they could be attacked and enslaved themselves. So the Europeans explained enslavement of Africans as a just war because it was part of the spreading of Christianity. And the Africans justified imprisoning other Africans from different nations in the name of protecting their own people. That's all the questions for today. You should enter your summary in the assignment Spain Builds an American Empire Slides Summary classwork.